In this video, I will be discussing a few of the feminist art movements in history from the 1970s through the 1980s. So what was the feminist art movement all about? The feminist art movement not only supported women artists, but also questioned the typical role of women in a patriarchal society and challenged those views by shedding light on the different ideas and talents women had to offer to the art world. Most feminist artists used mediums that were not historically used by men, such as paintings and sculpture. Instead, fresher mediums such as textiles, photography, video, and performance art were largely used in the feminist movement in order to broaden the definition of art. So where did it all begin? The feminist art movements began in the late 60s. Post-war America was flourishing economically, but a lot of social movements were on the rise as well. Let's remember that around this time, although America was indeed progressing, it had a long way to go still when it came to civil rights and equality. Let's keep in mind that at this point in time, women were already in the workforce, and they were granted with the right of birth control. In 1969, the Women Artists in Revolution protest, also known as WAR, protested the lack of representation of women artists in museums. It picketed the Whitney Annual, which included only 8 women artists out of 143 artists displayed. I'll save you the math. That's only 5%. Only 5% of women art was displayed for the world to admire. Ridiculous, right? But let's track back to what I believe was a very inspirational exhibit that perhaps helped the feminist art movement really take off. In 1964, an artist named Yoko Ono did an exhibit called Cut Piece. In this exhibition, Yoko sat silently while members from the audience would cut off pieces of her clothing, one by one, until she was left in nothing but her underwear. Yoko wanted to make society aware of the role of women in sexual violence. Yoko sat silently, in public, as if portraying the struggle that women have to go through sometimes to hide sexual violence, because of the stigma that came along with it. Her piece was very unique, and it shed light on a very important issue. It inspired many women artists to come out and vocalize their concerns and ideas the best way they knew how, with art. Her piece was also among the first examples of performance art. The 1970s. The 1970s continued to fuel the feminist movement fire. Many movements and amazing art pieces were created around this time. Perhaps one of the most influential feminists who contributed to this fire was Judith Chicago. She is believed to be one of the first people to coin the term feminist art. Judy was not only an artist, but an educator as well. She co-founded the California Institute of the Arts Feminist Program in 1972 with Miriam Schapira. It was the first feminist art program in the country at the time. The classes focused on teaching art history and women's role in the art society. It taught women different art techniques and the different mediums that could be used. One of Chicago's biggest and most known projects, however, was the dinner party. This piece was a dinner table in the shape of a huge triangle. Around 400 volunteers, mostly women, helped contribute to create 39 place settings representing historically mythical female figures such as artists, goddess, activists, and martyrs. Although each setting represents its own figure, they are set up the same, which is a hand-painted china plate, ceramic flatware and chalice, and a napkin with an embroidered gold edge. Each plate, except the one corresponded to Sojourn Truth, depicts a brightly colored, elaborately styled vulva form. Just to mention a few women featured in this work that might sound familiar would be Mary Wollstonecraft, Susan B. Anthony, Emily Dickinson, and Georgia O'Keeffe. Many artists criticized Chicago's piece, and some even called it disrespectful to some of the women who the piece represented. Judy wanted the world to know, however, and remember the grand things women had contributed to history. She wanted to highlight their greatness and how a patriarchal society can fear 39 powerful and intelligent women sitting at one table. This piece was regarded as the first epic feminist artwork. The 1980s. The 1960s and 70s helped carve a strong path for feminist art movements, but it was not enough time to change everything in the art world yet. Women were still being underrepresented in exhibits, so the fight still continued. One important group of women who were the highlight of the 1980s were the Guerrilla Girls. This group initially began with 7 women who would put gorilla masks over their heads to hide their identity. They did this because they did not want their identity to skew the opinions or get in the way of the actual point they were trying to protest. These group of women devoted their time and effort to not only fight sexism in the art world, but racism as well. The Guerrilla Girls were 100% against discrimination in the art world, and they would come up with clever ways to display these issues. One of their most important and famous billboards, which is one of their first and what inspired the group to come about, is their Museum of Modern Art protest billboard. It was the spring of 1985, and the museum was inaugurating an expanded part of the building. It then announced that it would have the era's most important artists displayed, and this exhibition from 17 countries around the world. The Guerrilla Girls did their research, and out of 165 artists that were being displayed for this exhibit, only 13 were women. Again, let me do the math for you real quick. That is only 8% of the whole exhibit. Now remember how I mentioned that in the 1960s only 5% of women were displayed in the Whitney Annual? That means that in the span of 20 years, this number only rose about 3%. The Guerrilla Girls continued their research, to which they called weenie counts, and discovered that in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, about 5% of the art was produced by women, while 85% of the nudes were women. So this is why the now famous billboard was created, the one that reads, "Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum?" The Guerrilla Girls were not only fighters, but they were clever. They did their research and came up with bold ways to highlight these issues in society. Although this group began with 7 women, it soon blew up. And now they have done more than 100 art projects all over the world and have over 500 members. The fight still continues for this group today. The feminist art movements in the 60s, 70s, and 80s not only affected women in art, but it highlighted many issues women were going through in society. These movements helped shape the way women are looked at today in the art world, carved a better path for women to feel more empowered with their art. The feminist art movements brought out some amazing artists, established art classes for women, and put feminist art on the map. Although I only touched the surface of the many movements and protests that occurred, I would encourage people to read further into this movement because it never stopped and it still goes strong today.